Now, let us understand convolution neural networks. This is the most important part of the neural networks till now because convolution neural networks started the deep learning boom. In 2012, there was a competition named ImageNet Large Scale Visual Recognition Challenge. In this challenge, the first winners they got a 15.4% top 5 error rate. The model name was AlexNet, and this was a huge leap compared to the previous algorithms used in the competitions. This started the interest in neural networks, and every year the model kept on improving. Human accuracy on the ImageNet dataset is around 5% error. So, a human is able to classify whether an object is belongs to a certain class or not with a 5% error rate. The ImageNet dataset has around 1000 classes, so it's quite a challenging task. Nowadays, neural networks are able to outperform even humans in the image detection challenge. So, what are convolution neural networks and how they changed the entire deep learning industry? Let us have a look. So, let us try to understand how convolution neural networks work on a very top level approach. So, this is a convolution neural network. Let us try to break it down and understand it piece by piece. So, first of all, let us try to understand the input data. The input data is an image which has a height of 227, a width of 227, and three channels which are red, green, and blue. We'll call them the RGB channels. So, this is how an image is represented over here. So, we are clear with the input data and how it's represented. Let's skip over the con1, con2, con3, con4, and con5 and go to the fully connected layers. We understand how fully connected layers work already. So over here, this input has 4096 hidden neurons, and there are two hidden layers after which the output has 1000 dimensions because there are a total of 1000 classes in the ImageNet dataset. After this, a softmax with log loss is applied to classify the objects. Okay, so now we are clear with how the input data looks and the fully connected layers. Let's try to understand the convolution layers which are there in between the input data and the fully collected layers. Currently, in our approaches till now, we have used the input data, which is the image, flattened it, and directly applied the hidden layers. Now, we are going to do some more processing on the input images and then finally flatten it to apply the hidden layers. This processing is going to be learned via convolution neural networks. So let us have a look at the first convolution operation. A, a convolution has kernels. Over here, we have shown one kernel in each layer. So let's have the look at how one kernel works. This kernel has a height of 11, width of 11, and a depth of 3. The depth 3 should always match that of the input data. So the input data over here has 3 channels, hence the depth of this kernel is also 3. Over here, as the input, this input has 96 channels, our kernel will also have a depth of 96. So now that we are clear about the dimensions of this kernel, which is 11 cross 11 cross 3, let us understand how this kernel is operated upon the input data. So we have this kernel and we move it in the up direction as well as the right direction, and we multiply all the inputs in the input data which overlap with the kernel. So over here we have, let's say, one value, we have another value in this kernel, we multiply them, we do this for all the kernel overlaps, and then finally we add them to get one value. We map this one value in the output of the first convolution layer, and we repeat the same operation by shifting this kernel by one step. We keep on repeating this for the entire rows and all the columns. After this, we get one depth output. The height is 55 because the stride in one step we skip over 4 pixels. Hence, the output is 55 in the height domain, 55 in the width domain as well. But the depth should have been 1 using one kernel, because we get just one output when we apply a kernel over the entire input data. We have 96 depths because we have used 96 kernels to generate the output of the first convolution layer. So you can imagine there are 96 such kernels which are applied on the input data to generate the first hidden layer. Similarly, over here we use 256 such kernels to generate the second convolution layer. We have this kernel, we apply it over all of the input data, and the stride we keep over here is 2. So as the stride is 2, we skip over 2 pixels each time, so our input size is halved. So we get 27 over here because 55 by 2 is 27. So the height is 27, width is 27, and as we use 256 kernels, the number of channels in the output is 256. The depth of this kernel filter has to be 96 because the output after the first convolution has a depth of 96. We keep on applying this convolution layer multiple times, and finally we get the output. We flatten the output. Flattening the output, it means that we convert this 3-dimension array to a 1-dimension array by flattening it out. And then we apply the hidden neural networks, feed forward fully connected neural networks to get the 1000 outputs. So this is how a convolution neural network works in the top level. Let us try to understand how it exactly works by visualizing one operation of the convolution. So we have the input image, which has the red, green, and blue components in the 3 channels. Let us represent them over here by these 3 images. So we have this first 2D image, it represents the red channel. The second one represents the green channel, and the third one represents the blue channel. Now we have our kernel. The kernel must also have 3 dimensions because the input has 3 dimensions. Hence, this is one kernel which has 3 dimensions, and we show each of them separately. So this kernel channel 1 corresponding to the red channel has these weights. Similarly, the channel 2 is corresponding to the green channel, and the channel 3 corresponds to the blue channel. Now we are going to take this kernel and apply it on the input data as shown in the animation. So we keep on applying this and we get a single number. So this number keeps on changing for the different windows. And finally, we get one number from the red channel, one number from the green, and one number from the blue, and we add them up. Just like a hidden neural network, we also have a bias. We add the bias, we get the output, and we put it in a 2D array. So we keep on repeating this for all the rows and all the columns, and we are finally able to fill in the 2D output. This is how one kernel of a convolution neural network works. Keep in mind that this output is only for one channel. That is why it is 2D. We can keep repeating this process for multiple channels which will have multiple kernels which will have different weights and different bias. We'll get multiple such 2D outputs. We can stack them all together to get a 3D output. So this is how convolution neural networks work. Now, what are the advantages of convolution neural networks over feed-forward neural networks? First of all, convolution neural networks are translation invariant. What it means is that if the image changes its position in the input data, yet the output of the neural network will remain unchanged. This is a really great property because it corresponds to our real life scenarios. If a car moves, we do not say that it has become a truck. We are quite pretty sure that it still remains the car. So, if the input data is translated, still the output should remain the same, and that is taken care by convolution neural networks partially. Next, there is the sharing of weights. Earlier, we used to have a single weight for each pixel corresponding to each hidden output. So there were a lot of parameters required to map each pixel to all the pixels of the hidden output. Right now, we have a common weight, a common kernel, which has fixed weights and is used to translate over the entire input data. Hence, we share the weights of every pixel. Hence, we reduce the number of weights. If we reduce the number of parameters, then it regularizes the model and reduces overfitting. So convolution neural networks reduce overfitting. Next, a very interesting feature of convolution neural networks is that they hierarchically build up the features. So as you can see in this picture, we give this picture as the input to the neural network. The first convolution neural networks layers will extract very low level features of the image, like a diagonal or a horizontal line or a vertical line of different colors and so on. So the first convolution layer has very low level features. As we go deeper into the network, the convolution neural networks start trying to find out some middle level features. So you can see over here, the convolution neural network tries to find out circles and other shapes, which are a buildup of the diagonals, horizontal, and vertical lines. Finally, if you go very deep into the neural network, you will be able to find high level features like eyes, nose, and so on. So this allows convolution neural networks to understand the input data very well and extract features which are easy for the fully connected neural networks to classify. Hence, convolution neural networks outperform standard feed-forward neural networks. They also get very great accuracies on many image as well as audio tasks. So, convolution neural networks are not just constrained to images, they also perform very good on audio tasks. So this question comes to our mind. CNNs, which is convolution neural networks, are more powerful than feed forward neural networks, right? Actually, no. Convolution neural networks are a subdomain of feed forward neural networks. Feed forward neural networks can do all that a convolution neural network can do. But can do does not mean will do. There is a huge difference over here. Feed forward neural networks, even though they can do the same things a CNN can do, they will not converge to that local minima because it is very unlikely. So, even though feed forward neural networks are a much larger domain than convolution neural networks, they easily overfit and do not converge to the local minima. If they converge to their best possible minima, then feed forward neural networks will outperform convolution neural networks. But we do not have an algorithm which will help us to go to the global minima of feed forward neural networks. And our current algorithms give very good results on convolution neural networks. That is why convolution neural networks outperform feed forward neural networks. Now, let us understand what are pooling layers. We have now seen what convolution neural network is, but convolution neural network is computationally very expensive to implement. If you have a look at the number of calculations happening, then each kernel is translated over the entire input image, and there are many such kernels. These convolution layers are usually applied in multiple times on the same input data. Hence, the computation can grow exponentially. So, how do we reduce the computation requirements of convolution neural networks? We can do this by using pooling layers. In pooling layers, what we do is we combine some of the inputs to downsample it in height and width domain. So let's say we have our input which has 24 height, 24 width, and 3 channels. We downsample our input 2 by 2 times and make it 3 cross 12 cross 12. By downsampling the image, we automatically reduce the computation requirements by 4 times. 2 times because of height and 2 times because of width. So a total of 4 times. Also, the memory requirements of your computer drastically decrease because now you have to store only one-fourth of the memory if you would not have used the pooling layers. Also, pooling layers have the advantage of being spatially invariant. Convolution neural networks are spatially invariant partially, but by using pooling layers, we make them even more spatially invariant. Because now, if an object was there in the one-fourth region of this image, then it downsamples and would be situated in the same pixel, even if it shifted in the original image. So that is why pooling layers even help improve spatial invariance of convolution neural networks. So we'll talk about two types of pooling layers. There are multiple kinds available, but these are the two most popular. There are the two pooling layers are max pool and average pool. In max pool, we find out the maximum of these four pixels, which is 100, and we get that as the output. We calculate the maximum of these four pixels, which is 184, and we take that as the output. Similarly, we get 12 over here and 45 over here. So we have reduced the input from a size of 4 cross 4 to a size of 2 cross 2 when the pooling size was 2 cross 2. So this is how max pooling works. In average pooling, as the name suggests, we take the average of all the pixels inside the kernel. So average of this is 36. So we take that as the output. Similarly, the average of this red block, yellow block and blue block, we take that as the output. So that is how max pooling and average pooling work. Let us see how gradients are propagated in pooling. In average pooling, it is easy to understand how we will backpropagate. If we are just taking the average, then it is similar to taking sum of the input, and finding the derivative of sum is very simple. But in max, when we take the maximum of the four values, then the maximum function is not differentiable. Hence, we actually cannot calculate the derivative of max pooling layers. So we take an approximation. We only propagate the gradient through the maximum value of the four samples, and we take the gradient to be 0 for the samples which were not maximum. In that approximation, we can use the max pool functions and yet have our model which is completely gradient differentiable. It's important that our model be differentiable because we are going to train our neural networks using gradient descent, which requires your entire neural network to be gradient differentiable. So that is how backpropagation works in pooling. That was it about convolution neural networks. Now let us try to understand what are adversarial attacks. Now we have one input image which we have trained on a convolution neural network, and we get very good results using the model. Our model is able to perfectly identify that this image is of a pig. Now we add a very small number to all the pixels of the image. If we have a look at the image, we cannot say if there is any difference between these two images. Yet our neural network will classify this image as an airliner and this image as a pig. This is called an adversarial attack. By changing the value of each pixel very slightly can drastically change the results of the image. Now, you guys might be thinking that we have found these values by very fine tuning and finding the noise for this particular sample. Nobody in real life will be able to randomly find out such values so that they are able to get wrong results on our data. It's very unlikely that this would happen, that a neural network is predicts a peg as an airliner. So can we ignore this adversarial attack problem? Actually, no. Even though the likelihood is very small, there are some situations in which it can be so dangerous that we need to eliminate it. Like, this is a stop signal. Our model correctly classifies it. But if we add even a small adversarial perturbation to this image, then it is misclassified as max speed 100. Nowadays, people are moving towards self-driven cars, and if this issue happens by some lighting and angle issue, at that particular angle and lighting, our model predicts that this stop sign is actually max speed 100. Then this will become a very hazardous situation and our self-driven car might cause accidents. Hence, we need to solve this adversarial perturbation attacks, and right now it's very hard to do so. Neural networks are prone to adversarial attacks, and even the best models, which are trained till date, perform very, very poorly on adversarial perturbations. So, that was it about adversarial attacks. Some of the extra things that you can read about from now is the article on 9 deep learning papers you need to know about. This article is written by Adesh Pandey and is a really good place where you can start your journey into deep learning. Next, the very important thing to learn is batch normalization. Batch normalization was a technique which allowed us to train neural networks which are very deep. After you are done with convolution neural networks, what next comes is recurrent neural networks. So we usually work on time series data, which keeps on changing with time. So these recurrent neural networks and long short-term memory neural networks, these are very popular and useful. And Kola has written a very great blog on this. So you can start learning from here. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed the session.